Hello and welcome to Next Op Social. We are your hosts, Richelli Wright and Joanne Buford. We believe entrepreneurship is empowerment, and we are committed to the development and progress of entrepreneurs, providing you with the information you need to build thriving businesses. Today, we're very pleased to welcome Kory Schieber, a business consultant who specializes in helping current and future entrepreneurs through the process of receiving a business loan, and I'm sure much more that we're about to learn about. So welcome, Kory. We're excited to have you at Next Up Social. So let's dive in. Tell us about yourself, your background, and your relationship with entrepreneurship.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. And it's not just my background that I'm going to share, but it's the background of our entire state network that I'm going to share, because we do cover the entire state of Michigan and ultimately the United States. But for myself personally, it is 2.5 years of retail, 12.5 years of design and build to order manufacturing, 2.5 years of micro lending. I've been teaching entrepreneurship since 2008. I am part-time faculty at Washtenaw Community College. I hold 4 degrees from my associates through my MBA with undergraduate and graduate concentrations in entrepreneurship. I am no stranger to this ecosystem.
Very nice. So tell us what you're doing then right now and who you're working with and whatnot.
Wow. I have got clients across an entire spectrum from I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm just ready for that next level, all the way to, hey, I have this idea. I just spoke with a client earlier in the week who was very much in the idea stage of things. So they were still trying to figure out exactly what it was that they want to do.
I like it. So, Kory, I'm looking at the acronym, right, on your Zoom title. And I'm also looking at the sign in the back, SBDC. So for the individuals who may not be that familiar with the organization, you mind elaborating a little bit?
For sure. Thank you so much for calling that out. We are the Small Business Development Center. And as I mentioned earlier, we cover the entire United States. Here, we cover all 83 counties in the state of Michigan. And I talked about my background, and you might say, Kory, that's a very diverse background. Well, all 100 plus of us consultants across the state of Michigan contain a diverse background, just like that.
Yeah. And so, you know, what caught my attention, Kory, when we had the conversation and I kind of checked out your profile on LinkedIn before I reached out to you, was a little bit of my personal backstory, right? For years, I knew the SBDC existed. Quite frankly, for years, I knew the SBA existed. But I kind of was operating in a vacuum, if you will, right? I had my own little bubble, my own small network. And, you know, for me, they were just acronyms, right? And I never quite knew the type of resources they could bring to bear to help an entrepreneur get started until I started having conversations with individuals who were affiliated with the SBA and now with the Small Business Development Center. And, you know, here at Next Opportunity Social, not only are we interviewing entrepreneurs, but we're also interviewing individuals who are aware of resources, are aware of different tactics, aware of places where people can go to get the assistance, guidance, support that they need, right? And you caught my attention in particular because I figured, okay, we get 2 for 1 here. Kory's been an entrepreneur, builds businesses, but also he knows where resources are at, right? And our last conversation actually really opened my eyes when, you know, I quite frankly asked, you know, who should I converse with? Who should I talk to? Who are like the stakeholders in our ecosystem? Whereas if entrepreneurs wanted to get connected to organization or person, you could direct them there, right? And when you were so altruistic with your time and the connections you knew, I said, okay, we got to have Kory on. So, I mean, for the entrepreneurs listening in who may not be familiar with the SBDC, right? Why? why should they come out their cubbyhole, off their YouTube channel, or their small little clique of individuals where they're receiving information from and say hello to you all?
We are no cost, which is probably one of the biggest flags that we wave. There is no cost for our services. So looking back at the background that I shared with you, an entrepreneur gets to sit down with me at no cost. They get to sit down with any one of my team, no cost. They get to sit down with any one of us across the state, no cost. And that's not just a one-time, oh, let's lure you in. That's each and every time. It is no cost.
I love it. And an entrepreneur sits across the table from you, or nowadays across Zoom, right? And they're ideating, or they have an ideal. Maybe they've gone from ideating, so they've gone ahead and set up the S Corp, the C Corp, the LLC, whatever the case may be. And they're like, Kory, look, you know, where can I acquire financing? Kory, where can I acquire an operating system? Where can I acquire a business plan? How does this process work when engaging the SBDC? What should they expect from you or anyone else working with the organization?
First thing they should expect is we're going to meet them where they are. And just like you said, okay, I've got the LLC, I've got a business up and running. Maybe I need an operating system. Maybe I need an accounting system. We're going to have that conversation around different systems and what's going to work best for that particular entrepreneur in that situation. And a lot of it is going to come down to where do they plan to go with this business. So is this a hobby business? Because there's nothing wrong with that, right? Everyone's got a side gig. Nothing wrong with that. Is this a hobby business? Are you looking to build the next Amazon? What are you looking to do with this business? And that's going to help determine the line that that conversation is going to follow.
And so, you know, I'm listening to you, and, you know, a couple of times we've mentioned really startups, right? Businesses are in the fledgling stages. And it was kind of funny. I was just having a conversation with Shelly about this. And, you know, to be a B2B professional, whether you're affiliated with an organization like what you're doing, or whether or not you have basically opened up your own boutique, your own shop, I think it's exciting, right? I think last time I looked at statistics, they said there's between 400,000 and 500,000 startups right now being born every single month because of what's transpiring in terms of the pandemic and everything else. So, you know, for those of us who are already involved in the industry, it's like, yes, you know, this is what I've been waiting for, right? More people to help. But Kory, you know, the other thing that I'm really concerned about, and I'd be curious to hear your opinion, right? A lot of individuals jump into entrepreneurship, particularly if they're W-2. And you already know where I'm going with this. They take they take that W-2 mindset, they take that 40-hour work week, and they think they can apply that same, how can I be politic about it? The same degree of work ethic that you have at a W-2, and think that's going to suffice for a 1099. And that is very disconcerting to me, because I don't think people are having that type of conversation with folks frequently enough.
I very much agree with you. The amount of people I talk to who either A, want someone to do it for them, or B, want to sit back and let checks roll in is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I think that's where you were going, because you're right. I've got the same mindset too as someone who has run businesses, someone who gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning, goes to bed. You know, you get up when it's dark, you go to bed when it's dark. I'm sorry, that's the way the cookie crumbles in this world. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to have a business, that is your business. And you heard me state earlier, you know, some people have a hobby business, and that's great and that's fine. Some businesses can do that. But if you're going to be one of those folks who says, I want to replace my W-2 with a 1099, guess what? You're going to work for it. And you had better have a work ethic. a good one.
What are some of the other, I guess, pieces of advice? I mean, when you come across individuals who need that talking to, right? And they need a bit of direction or guidance in terms of, you know, what that work ethic should look like, what their itinerary should look like, you know, how they should go about the business of developing the entrepreneurial muscle and stamina to do what's necessary. I'd be curious to know, what does that conversation sound like when you're chatting with them?
You're reminding me of one conversation in particular where I walked a client out of my office and right into a job fair that was happening because a business was not going to suit them. They needed a job. They were an employee. That was that. Thankfully, there was a job fair going on right in our building, and that's what I walked them into. But I hear what you're saying, and what is that conversation going to sound like? Many folks, many folks already have the drive, the spirit. They want to do this. I'll tell you where people miss, and that comes down to the money. Of all places, they're missing on the money. I have worked with people who were effectively paying themselves 38 cents an hour to make their product. Get a job at McDonald's at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people don't focus on the dollars. The dollars don't make sense, and they push forward with a business that is actually costing them money.
So I guess my question would be, we as entrepreneurs, not everyone has the luxury of starting their business and being able to pay themselves right away, and or things might fluctuate with that pay, or like you were saying, they don't understand the money factor behind it. Your advice is to go get a job rather than necessarily, or what other services do you provide to help them move through that so they are paying themselves effectively?
Those are the tough conversations that we're going to have. In this particular case that I mentioned, that entrepreneur was paying themselves 38 cents an hour effectively. We talked about the pricing of their product, wholesale and retail, and what their labor costs were actually worth. We're able to bump that up. So I'm not telling someone to go and get a job. I'm offering the comparison to say, okay, look, here's what you're really doing. Here's what it's really costing you. Same thing could happen to a landscaper. You know, if you come to my house and you say, Kory, I'm going to charge you $20 to mow your lawn, and it takes you 2 hours, you're effectively paying yourself $10 an hour, right?
Right.
Simple math. And it sounds like simple math, but entrepreneurs in the moment don't see it that way. And sometimes you really have to coax that out.
So what are some of the services that you offer to help them properly scale their business and properly grow their business so that they're not paying themselves pennies or too little?
We offer exactly what I'm doing right now. You are going to sit in my office on a Zoom or in my office until October when they start doing construction on the building. And we're going to have a very real conversation about your business. We're going to look at your numbers. And some entrepreneurs are going to say, well, Kory, I don't really have the numbers. Well, guess what? We're going to put them together. We're going to have the tough love conversation.
I like it. I like it. And you know, you touched on something. I mean, because oftentimes entrepreneurs are blinded by the passion. You know, the business is their baby, and they envision the baby growing up and becoming an adolescent, and they envision the baby at some point becoming an adult, right? Self-sufficient, now truly an asset. I can go sip on pina coladas on the beach, right? But but there are things that need to be invested in that child. That child needs to be fed a certain kind of way. That child needs a certain type of diet, right? In order for it to really grow and become healthy. And so I like, I like hearing what you said. And, for me, I know Rochelle was an eyebrow raiser, right? To say, go get a job. However, I will admit, I mean, there have been several occasions over the last couple of months where I don't want to defecate in people's cornflakes, but at the same time, I mean, seriously, sometimes it's necessary. I mean, there's also something to be said, I think, for if there's $1.50 on the table, which one do you take? And there's no reason why you can't take both, right? There's no reason why you can't take the $1.50. You can't take, I guess, and that's my concern, right? I firmly believe that a lot of these entrepreneurs are being born today or are making a decision to transfer W-2 to 1099. I'm encouraging more and more people, more than I ever have in the past, to do both, right? Keep your job. Take the 50 cents, right? And then continue to build that 50 cents to the point where at some point it does supplant your income. But my biggest concern right now is people are saying, I'm at home, I'm not going back to that job, I'm going to start this business. And now that a lot of these resources are going to start getting cut off, these government resources, now they're going to start feeling the pinch, right? And some people are like burning the bridges. They're just like, I hate you, I hate my supervisor.
At both ends.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm concerned about that, So for me, it's interesting to hear that, you're kind of on the same wavelength there.
So let me build on that, because I think you're bringing up a very, very solid point in the entrepreneurship journey, and that's experience.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have experience. If you're going to go to a consultant, a lender, a funder, an investor, whatever the case, and you say, hey, I want to open a restaurant. Great. That's awesome. You know what? You're right. Ypsilanti needs that kind of restaurant. What's your experience? Well, I know how to cook. I barbecue at parties. You know what? That ain't going to cut it. You have to have that experience. And I think what a lot of entrepreneurs are missing right now is the opportunity to get into the world they want to be in, because I feel like literally everyone is hiring right now. My mom is getting new carpeting put in. Guess what? They're hiring. You know what? We had a conversation about that, because the consultant in me wants to have a business conversation. Everyone is hiring. Go out, get yourself some experience in your field. It's not that hard to do. And this is the time to do it, because everyone is hiring. And to the point earlier, yes, I guess I'm basically saying go and get a job.
I find it, I'm conflicted, because I think of some of our guests here who absolutely have built their businesses off passions that they did not have direct experience with. I think about Marlon, who in Detroit Pepper Company, he was cooking food for his autistic son. He found that this was healthy. He did not have restaurant experience. He did, seek out other opportunities, but he did that also while he was building his business. And I can think of so many examples of people who may have not had the direct experience. I do agree that gives people absolutely a leg up, right? A huge leg up, huge understanding. But I don't think it's something you can just say, well, then you can't do it, right?
And I would never do that. I'm working with more than one client at this time who, because I'm part-time faculty, I work with a lot of very young entrepreneurs. They don't have that experience.
Right.
But you know what they do have? They have that drive and they have that passion. I can't teach that. I can't teach you drive. I can't teach you passion. You have to bring that to the table. And to all of the points, I would build a blanket of drive and passion, where if you don't have the drive and passion, then none of it is going to matter. If you do have the drive and passion, chances are you might even be working in the industry already. Am I right?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, I guess, as I think about this conversation, when we think about what the qualifications are for an entrepreneur and what's required to be successful, right? It can become a very nuanced conversation. From an outsider looking in, particularly people who have not been entrepreneurs, right? They're going to look at your degree, right? Or what school you attended. They're going to look at your previous work experience and the occupation that you were in. So I guess you can call that experience. They're going to turn around and perhaps they're going to inventory your hard skills, right? So whether or not you have IT experience, whether or not you come from a finance background, graphic design background, if you're already a musician, a nod to Shelly over here. But then
I was a drummer.
Yep, there it is. But then there are the things that we don't talk about when we have a conversation about qualifications, right? We don't talk about emotional IQ, right?
EQ.
EQ, yeah. We don't talk about, once again, drive. Whether or not you have a good engine, whether or not you have a good work ethic. You're willing 5 a.m. to 9, 10 o'clock, So a lot of people are fluffing the pillows. I'm like, no, you better be passing out on your pillow when you first start out, right? Do you have that mindset? Do you have a clear vision? Do you have enthusiasm and excitement? I mean, I have not met a single business owner that, especially in the beginning, if you're not fanatical about what you do, you have a hard time acquiring attention, right?
You have to be.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when it comes to these soft skills, what I'm finding when I'm having conversations about entrepreneurs is they come to the table oftentimes with money, even sometimes a lot of things, but they haven't really taken inventory of their own behavior and how they respond to stress. And for me, I guess the most important question, in my humble opinion, you have to answer as an entrepreneur when you're starting out, is you got to give some things up to go up. Are you willing to give up Game of Thrones every weekend? Seriously, I don't even watch, you can tell I don't watch television anymore. I don't even know what's on television. I guess so. Are you willing to give up Netflix?
I watch PBS.
Right. Are you willing to give up going out 3 times a week and sipping on that beer and getting that burger? Are you willing to give up tailgating parties on the weekend with your favorite team? What are the things you're willing to give up in order to go up? Because it's got to be a trade-off. And I'd be curious to know what that conversation sounds like when you're conversing with folks.
It's going to sound very similar to what you just said. And this is going to take the time. And I work with all kinds of folks. So I have the folks who are driven, who have that passion. And they say, Kory, tailgates, whatever. I'm all about this business. This is what I'm doing. This is my passion. This is my drive. I want to help people. This product is going to make their lives better. I have to get it out there. And I work with the people who are I want to sit back and I'm going to kick this business and checks are just going to roll in. And you're absolutely right in everything you said. And I think it's a theme that's kind of progressing along this conversation. If you don't have that drive and that passion for that business, it's going to be an anchor more than it's going to be a lure, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I like the comparison. I mean, I'm a firm believer that at some point in your business or entrepreneurial journey, you should start attracting the talent that you need. You shouldn't have to, if you have to go out and pursue the talent, pursue the resources, if you're constantly in pursuit of things, or as I hear a lot of younger folks say, you're constantly in pursuit of the bag, you'll always be chasing it. at some point you have to transition and get to a stage in your business where you are attracting the things that you want, right? And I'm not one of those people that believes in that hokey, the secret, right? I just don't. I'm sorry. I'm not that guy. I believe self-concept is important. I think that's a huge part of it. But you're just not going to dream the money from the ceiling. Like, it's not going to fall like manna from the sky because you've made this decision today. Like, you're not special. And yeah, I know I just said that, didn't I? But I mean, seriously, you're not especially blessed. You have to get out here and get it out the dirt like everyone else. You got to bring value like everyone else. You have to do the work. And so, you know, I keep going back to what's foremost in my mind is what I was thinking about. I know you're having an audience for a lot of individuals in the marketplace right now. I know you have to be talking to just as many people as we are, given the line of work that you're in. I'm just kind of curious to know, you know, how people are behaving out there, what's trending, you know, what are the type of mindsets that you're encountering, and what are the things that you're excited about working with entrepreneurs, and, you know, what are the things you have concerns or you have a degree of consternation about?
I'm going to bring that back to what you said earlier about the people who are sitting at home and either maybe they're working at home like I am right now, obviously, or they're stuck at home because their job isn't essential, as they like to call it. And they're really thinking about that next step. What concerns me the most is going to be desperation. If you're starting a business out of desperation, we need to talk seriously. We need to have a conversation. Let's make sure that is the right path and the right journey for you, because it's not for everybody, which at this point in the conversation, I think that should have come out, right? Between me, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Owning your own business is not for everybody. So let's have that conversation. And at the end of that conversation, if we decide that isn't for you, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. We had a great conversation. But what concerns me the most is the desperation at this point. So I want to bring it back to that.
Yeah, I mean, Rochelle and I have had this conversation so often, right? The short-term versus long-term thinking. And, you know, when your stomach is touching your back, it's hard to focus. You know, whether it's touching your back emotionally, psychologically, physically, whatever the case may be, because you're focused on the hunger. And, you know, for me, I'll willingly admit one of the biggest errors in judgment I made is I started out in the banking and financial service industry. I was building my practice as an investment advisor. And I became impatient. I was upset. I was angry. I was tired of being the only pepper in the room. I was tired of working my derriere off and feeling like I wasn't getting the attention or the business or the type of support that I wanted. And I jumped ship. And I remember, I jumped ship twice, right? I jumped ship on the banking industry and I jumped ship being an investment advisor. And I remember there was a very prominent attorney here in Detroit metropolitan area. He says, look, man, you're learning on their dime. Be patient, stay there, get the experience, continue to get the information, continue to get these things, because if you jump ship, your stomach is going to touch your back. And you're not going to be able to invest in your business because you're going to be taking the money you would invest and you're going to be living off of it. Right. And for me, that's always a very, very difficult conversation to have with entrepreneurs, because when you see it, you know it. If you're an entrepreneur, you know when someone's living off every dime and they're really not investing themselves in their business. And for me, I see it almost like a slow death, right? If you don't turn that corner, if you don't start investing in yourself, sooner or later, it doesn't have to be a pandemic involving a virus. It could be another type of pandemic that pops up, right? I mean, quite frankly, I firmly believe the economy is getting ready to course correct real soon. We've had these absurd market returns. We've had absurd increases in property evaluations. I mean, eventually the bubble does have to burst, people. Like, what are you doing to prepare? Because it hasn't burst. It did not burst during the pandemic. Like during 2008, I remember what that was like. There were no checks coming. And people try to compare it now to 2008. I try to remind people, 2008, there were no checks. You know, if you went out of business, you just went out of business. I remember I had clients that, I mean, $10, $20 million valuations. And then we sit down 2 months later and they can't afford to buy a beer. You know, they have that little cash flow. And I guess that's kind of where my head is going, right? I'm looking at all these individuals who are kind of sitting back thinking they're going to start up businesses, and the correction that's not happened. Like the pain, I'm not going to dismiss the pain of agony and death, right? And everything that transpired. But the real pain, in my humble opinion, hasn't even started yet.
I would agree with you. I'm definitely not an economist. As I said very early on, my education is in entrepreneurship, but I very much feel what you're saying, that we have an economy that is going to course correct, and we don't know what that's going to look like. If you do know what that's going to look like, I would love to have a conversation with you, and I'd love to know where I should be putting my money, right? You obviously have a crystal ball, but many people don't. And mentioning 2008 kind of triggered me just a little bit, because that was my second layoff in the auto industry. It was the day before Thanksgiving, 2008. Oh. So happy Thanksgiving, get out of my shop type of thing. And that next day, I made a very big decision. It was not to start a business, but I did say, I am out of the private sector. Let's go figure out what else exists in this world. And that was when I started teaching entrepreneurship. That was when I discovered the SBDC. That is also when I started building my personal network that consists of folks like you, absolutely amazing people doing amazing things that I never would have known had I kept my foot on that shop floor.
So I've asked you this before, but I've thought about this a lot in the conversation and the changes that we've had, right? For me, there's always this tension. I like having these conversations. I like helping people. Whatever information I have, I like passing along. I always tell people, look, I'm not the oracle. Okay, I'm not the architect in the matrix, so I do not have all the answers.
There you go.
But I will share with you the little bit that I do have, right? And I hope it's worth something. But there's that tension between doing the work that you're doing now, really as a coach and consultant, right? Versus I like to just go out and build things. You know what I'm saying? I like to build things. Like I can only talk about it but for so long. I have to get out and get my hands dirty. It's the reason why I didn't become a teacher. Everybody says, why don't you teach? You teach well, you train well. But I was like, I like to get in the dirt. I don't want to be teaching these things. I want to be doing these things, you know? And I guess I'd be kind of curious though, how you straddled that fence, because you've tasted entrepreneurship, you've had success. I know you have to be chomping at the bit sometimes, looking at some of these opportunities that present itself to you. What's the decision-making process there for you, Kory? I'm not trying to get you in trouble with SBDC, but you know, I want to ask.
You're totally fine. And I'm going to hold up just one of my prototypes that I built over the years. It doesn't stop. It doesn't go away. Just yesterday, I was out in the driveway. I'm on my knees. I'm hacking up a piece of carpeting, working on the next idea. It's always going to be there. It's always a part of me. It's not going away. I'm trying to see if I have any other prototypes sitting around. No, that was the only one. But I know they're out in the garage. They're down in the basement, and I won't get out of the camera view to go and get them. But they're everywhere. And those are just the product businesses. I do have this. Hang on. Yeah. I do have this. This contains all the ideas, or I should say most of the ideas that I have worked on over the years. Everything from products to services to movies, commercials, it's all in there. And this is someone who built their first prototype at the age of 8.
Oh, wow. Okay. I like it.
So going off some of those success stories, especially with the work that you've done as a coach and a consultant, what are, and I don't know how specific you can get and whatnot, but what are some of, especially in the past year, a year and a half, of really amazing success stories and clients you've worked with that you've seen already maybe even impact the community around us here within like Ypsi and Metro Detroit and all that? Or what have been some really, amazing experiences that you've had with clients and people who've come into the SBDC that you've gotten really excited about the work that they're about to do?
You're absolutely right. Because of confidentiality, I can't go into detail. If I could tell any prospective entrepreneurs out there, one, the banks are lending. You can get a business loan. You're going to need to bring cash to the table, and that can be upwards of 40%, but they're lending. So we have a lot of clients in front of lenders right now. Personally, I have 2 of them with a third one on deck that's going to be going in front of a lender to get funding to launch their business. That is a piece that hasn't died. So if you're worried about the money, again, I would say let's have a conversation.
Now I have to ask, right? So the entrepreneur brain is always on for me. So, because the assumption is, right, and you're right, there's an assumption that because the government monies that were made available are no longer accessible, let's put it that way, to most people. Okay, basically we're SOL, right? And you're saying banks are actually lending. They haven't frozen assets. They haven't backed off. They are like still full steam ahead. Now I'm curious to know, because, parameters change so much, particularly over the last, 10 years, right? And you may or may not know this question, but for our listening audience, literally 3-4 years ago, you could have a 650 credit score and you could walk into a bank and it will be reasonable to expect that you have a chance of acquiring some kind of funding, right? And definitely with a micro lender, that would work. And then right before the pandemic, that jumped to 675, you had to have at minimum, right? And then there are some places where it's just flat 700 or we're not even going to talk to you. What's going on now in terms of parameters? Do you have any idea for those who are listening in?
I don't want to say that it's open, but gosh darn it, you can talk to almost anyone at this point. Yes, the money is there, but as I stated just a few moments ago, you're going to have to bring money to the table. And that's probably one of the hardest conversations I have to have with the person is, Kory, I don't have any money. I have this awesome idea and I can be on board with it and we're going to push it forward. But gosh, does that make it hard?
Yeah. And you're saying cash, not just collateral. You need to bring cash to the table.
You should be bringing cash to the table. And there is one thing I want to say in that world of, this is really where you see the rich get richer and the poor get poor. Because if you don't have something to bring to the table, you're not going to take something off the table.
Okay.
So we're getting towards the end, but we have a few questions we always ask all of our interviewers here at the end. So the first one is, if you had a superpower, what would that be?
I actually have a superpower.
Okay.
Many people don't know that. I have the ability to rust metal.
Okay.
The pH of my body is such that if I put a handprint
Yes.
on a piece of metal, come back in a couple days, you will see a rusted handprint on that metal.
I see what you're saying. Interesting. That is a superpower. Very nice.
Don't let me near your car.
Right. And if there was one, and you shared a lot of important lessons, and I know we just touched on, especially with the banking and the money one, but if there is one very important lesson that you want to leave our listening audience with regarding entrepreneurship, what would that be?
Follow the drive and the passion. If it's there, it's going to lead you to amazing places. And these are actually parallel paths. Reach out to the resources that are out there. If you're not talking to someone about what you're doing, you are going down the wrong path. There are so many resources out there. The SBDC, SCORE, the Entrepreneurship Center at WCC, we're all free. We're all no cost. Talk to us. That's what we're here for. If you're doing it alone, you're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, I think it's great. So how can people reach out either to you, Kory, or learn more about the SBDC to reach out as well? What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
The best place to start is going to be michigansbdc.org on our website. You'll find a general email, a general phone number. You'll be able to register for consulting, to sit down with someone like me. You'll be able to sign up for workshops, all at that website, michigansbdc.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kory, for joining us here. For those of you listening, we're going to provide those links in our show notes so that you can click and make those appointments right away and connect with Kory further. We'll be continuing this conversation inside the Next Stop Social After Show group on Facebook. We invite everyone watching and listening to join us there. The link is also in our description, or you can head to Facebook, go to Next Stop Social, click community, and we'll be happy to have you inside. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button here on YouTube or visit our website at nextstopsocial.com to learn more. And if you love today's episode, if you learned a lot from today's episode, if you know someone who needs to start having conversations and get this help, as Kory mentioned, please share it as well. Thank you again, Kory. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.